You know how it goes. Before we jump in today, let's do a little bit of business. First off, if you are at all concerned about your health, you have some chronic issues, you just don't feel good, you don't feel that you're at optimal levels, you don't feel elite, then you need to check out my man, Christian Yordanov, who is a functional health coach, functional health practitioner, an author, and just all around serious dude in the world of health. He has a book called How to Actually Live Longer, Volume 1. You can get that on Amazon right now. He's working on Volume 2. And if you are a member of the back channel, the Big Truth Podcast Patreon, you can win a copy of that because I'm got a little contest going right now. So if you don't know what that is, go to patreon.com/bigtruth and check it out. We got all kinds of levels of patronage, and that's where you can support the show. But getting back to Christian, I've been working with him for a few months now, and I've dropped serious weight. I've got off a 4 energy drink a day habit. Now I'm down to maybe 1 a week, maybe 2 on a really stressful week, sometimes 1 every 2 weeks, right? So instead of 4 of them a day, 1 a week is pretty good. It's not perfect. No one's perfect. But I feel better. I have more energy through the day, no crashing, and it's all natural. And it's data driven. So you get some blood work, you do a urine screen, you find out what you are sensitive to, what you're lacking, and he comes up with a whole protocol, supplementation, and also behavioral that will help you address all of those issues. And it seriously works. I ain't messing with you. So check out livelongerformula.com/bigtruth. I'm working with Christian I'm promoting this because I agree with it. And you can ask anyone I know. I've been touting it and trying to get people involved because it's really helped me a lot and it'll help you. So go to livelongerformula.com/bigtruth. Check it out. You can you answer some questions. Christian will talk with you. There's so much, right? I can't even explain how much time he takes with you compared to like going to your regular doctor. And I'm not doubting it. Western medicine has its place, right? Like, and you got a cut, or you need an amputation, you need a surgery, 100%. But they're not super big on prevention or doing things. Rather, our medical system, unfortunately, not everyone, but a lot of it is more geared towards prescribing pharmaceuticals to deal with symptoms rather than dealing with root causes. And that's what Christian gets at. So check him out. Tell him I sent you. He's going to hook you up. Now, if you need artwork of any kind, whether it's from a postcard size piece of art to a full poster, you need to check out my man Johannes over at Tattoo Flash Collective. And that's simply at tattooflashcollective.com, on Instagram at Tattoo Flash Collective. He will supply you with whatever you need, right? And this is like not only all sizes of prints, but different qualities. If you just want like a cheaper poster print, you can get that. If you want a museum quality archival print on, that paper that never fades, that'll be a family heirloom, he got you there. Also, as the name implies, if you need Tattoo Flash, whether it's for a shop or just for your own enjoyment, he's the dude. You know what I mean? He works with tattoo artists all over the country that draw Tattoo Flash, but also just general art. And it's a collective. So, these people are getting paid on time on a regular basis and, rewarded for their efforts, right? It's not like some culture vulture situation where someone's just ripping off artists all over the place. It's 100% above the board. So go to tattooflashcollective.com, use the promo code BigTruth at checkout. You will get 10% off your order. If you are a back channel Patreon subscriber, you get even more off your order, but you have to join to get that code. Now, if you need motorcycle stuff, you're riding, you need parts, you need riding gear, whatever, check my shop out, Chopperhead Custom Cycles. We're a full brick and mortar motorcycle shop. That means you can come in. I got a parts counter. I got a showroom. I got an area with helmets and riding gear. I got an area with shop swag. And then in the back, we're a full service motorcycle shop. We work on any year Harley. We do whatever you need, whether you need an oil change, performance work, or you want a whole custom bike built from the ground up, we do it. So give us a shout. Come by the shop because we are a physical location. It's not an online thing. It's not some little remote shop hidden away that you need a secret code and knock 3 times and do this and that to get in, which I do like, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to lie there. But we're a full walk-in shop, full service. So if you are not local to Freetown, Massachusetts, you can order online, www.choppahead.com, which is spelled CHOPPAHEAD. Now, June 18th, Laconia Bike Week. We have a motorcycle show going on. Us in the Left Lane Collective have teamed up again. We did a show last year to test it out, to see how it would go, and it went crazy. It was awesome. The turnout was great. This year we're doing it again. We got a small kind of cultivated group of bike builders that are bringing their bikes from all over the country that we're going to show in a specific area, but it's a ride-in show. So ride your custom bike over to the show, and it's at the drive-in theater, the biggest property on Laconia, so you can't miss it. Under the guise of riots, so check out the riots area of Laconia. We're cultivating our own little cool area that's like a show within the show. And that night, we have the Chophead 25th anniversary party. So the motorcycle show's from 12 to 6 on Thursday, June 18th. That night, Chophead 25th anniversary party. I'll be there. We'll be doing live podcasts. I'm going to be teaming up to do some live podcasts. I can't make that announcement yet with exactly who, but I can tell you we got Slane performing, we got Murphy's Law performing, and we got a bunch of other people performing, all kinds of stuff going down, so make sure you check it out. And the best thing is the hill climbs are Wednesday, which is what people want to see, and then our show is Thursday, and then you can bounce out before it gets super hectic on the weekend. Just go ride around New Hampshire, then ride home. You know, you don't have to sit in the traffic of Laconia. All right. For more information on the podcast, just go to bigtruthpodcast.com. If you hit... And I was told that my episodes aren't up there, but I recently switched to a new hosting company. So everything's moving over, but it's still available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and, you know, wherever you get your podcasts. It's just, there's a little glitch and it's not showing up on my personal website yet, which is ridiculous. But, you know, I do this myself with the help of my one friend that helps me with doing graphics. And that's about it right now. If you want to get more involved in the show, would love to have a young Jamie type character, like how Joe Rogan has, someone that would help produce and chime in on stuff and things like that. So hit me up. But hit the show, hit the store link and get some show swag. We got all kinds of stuff out there. There's like 4 or 5 designs, and you can get whatever you want: t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, house pillows, craziness. Because it's a merch fulfillment company, and they'll print it on pretty much anything. Wild stuff. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the show right now.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
Yes, once again, we have liftoff. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Big Truth Podcast, and I'm stoked to be joined today by Adam Swart, who's the founder and CEO of Crowds on Demand, which you may or may not heard of. And if you haven't, you're gonna get into it right now. But Adam, thanks for joining us today. Stoked to have you on, like as I was saying before. But for listeners or viewers that might not be as familiar with you, can you give a little bit of background on yourself and a little bit of information about Crowds on Demand and what you're doing over there?
Sure. Well, Truth, it's great to be on your program, and a bit about Crowds on Demand. We're the largest protest company in the country. We've been around for 14 years almost at this point. So we've transcended different eras of political, social, and cultural life in this country. I've been at this since I was in college, and I've aged with this business, so to speak. And one of the things that we specialize in is organizing peaceful, lawful protests and comprehensive advocacy campaigns. And I'm here in part to talk about the business and dispel a lot of the rumors and fake news about what we do. But I'm also here to tell your listeners a little bit about how they can advocate for themselves, because one thing that I help my customers do is to advocate for their interests, right? And I guide them through the best advocacy strategies. But a lot of you guys are going to deal with situations where you need to be your best advocate, and you don't need me, but you need a template for how to advocate for yourself in society. You're dealing with a landlord. The hospital hits you with a $50,000 bill that you don't think is justified, right? These are things that just happen to people all the time. And it's very important for people to have the tools to know how to deal with them.
Sure. Great. So why don't we talk a little bit about your company first, and then we can definitely have a whole segment on people being able to advocate for themselves personally, because that's obviously important in this day and age. It's always important, but I feel like it's it's super important today. But so for those that are maybe hearing about Crowds on Demand for the first time, like, what is it that in just general terms, what is it that you guys do? Like, I know you kind of mentioned it. But like, what do people come to you guys for specifically?
Well, they come to us to organize protests, number one. That's probably the number one request we get. They come to us for PR stunts. That is to say, like, I call PR stunt like a positive protest, or a positive event. So it doesn't have to be a protest, but some sort of demonstration. Maybe they're outside a convention center or something to launch a product or to raise awareness about your company, right? They also come to us, probably are like, in terms of money wise, most of our money comes from comprehensive advocacy campaigns. So that might be a little bit of everything, right? So it might be strategic guidance, it'll be protests, it'll be phone calls, it'll be creating advocacy groups, it'll be very comprehensive in nature and long-term in nature.
So when someone comes to you for a protest, for example, like, what is it that they're getting? Like, are you just like helping organize and like recruit, or are you what are you supplying? Like, I guess that's what, maybe where some misconceptions come in. Like, what is it that you guys are actually supplying for a protest, for example?
Well, number one misinformation is that we have anything to do with unlawful forms of like protest, which I would call a riot. I don't think unlawful protest is a riot. It's not a protest, right? Yeah. So i.e. vandalism, violence, blocking a road without a permit, whatever, right? That is not a form of protest that we condone, and it's not something I even classify as protest. So what we do is, in terms of what we do for a protest, though, it is full service. We provide the people. We provide passionate people who are enthusiastic about the cause, articulate, and dressed appropriately, right? We provide supervision for those protests to make sure that it goes on kind of per the client's wishes. We provide signs, banners, flyers, all the materials needed, sometimes costumes, everything, right? And sometimes we'll even provide the advocacy group under the auspices of which the protest occurs, right? So we provide everything. So my goal is that if my client wants to fund a protest and not even be part of it, they can do that. And now some people might be like, oh, well, wait, Adam, isn't that shady for somebody to be able to anonymously fund a protest? No, it's actually a form of free speech that's been protected by the Supreme Court. Why? Because we have something called cancel culture, right? So a lot of times, a lot of people don't necessarily want to have their name behind a protest or a movement because they're worried they will get canceled if they do, right? Like, I worked with a lot of conservatives under the previous administration, the Biden administration, right, who were like, look, we want to advocate for conservative causes, but if my board hears that I funded something conservative, then they're going to oust me, you know what I mean, for cancel culture. And now you kind of have a little bit of the same thing on the other side. So at the end of the day, to me, that's a big problem. I oppose cancel culture, and being able to anonymously fund something legal, right, is a right that has been affirmed by the United States Supreme Court multiple times, I believe.
Sure. So with your just with Crowds on Demand, do you guys have a political slant, or is it just like, hey, it's just whatever client comes to? Do you get clients both on the left and the right, or conservative or progressive?
We work with liberal and conservative, to be sure. If we have a political bent, it is certainly not a partisan political bent. So I'm an independent. I got my start as a Democrat. It's true, right? I'm from California, but ultimately I'm an independent, and
Sure.
I'm proud to work with conservatives and proud to work with liberals. But if there is a political bent, I would say it's common sense. Okay, well, what's common sense? It's common sense as Adam defines it, right? Because it's my company.
Sure.
But I like to say what my definition of common sense is would 70 to 80% of people, if I asked about this cause, would they agree with it?
Okay.
Right. So that is to say, on the liberal side, would I say you should not die on the street because of lack of access to healthcare? You should have healthcare provided to you as a right. I think 88% of Americans would agree with that statement, right? That's a liberal statement. I would also say the police department should be funded, should not be defunded. We want a police that responds to crime and that tackles crime responsibly, right? I would say 80% of people agree with that. That's considered a conservative position, right?
Sure.
So if there's a bent, it's definitely like advocating for common sense. So one other misnomer about my business, about Crowds on Man, is we serve minority interests. I'm not talking about ethnic minority. I'm talking about political minority interests, right? And that we actually allow the political minority to be heard over the majority. No, it's actually the opposite. A lot of times a vocal minority can just basically have their will because they show up at these city council hearings, supervisor hearings, all these various events, especially local or state politics, and then they just yell and scream, and the elected officials are like, okay, give them what they want, right?
Yeah, not necessarily the majority, just the loudest voices on
that's
that.
right. That's right. And we're often the counter force to that because, so like take an issue like this is a great example. So in Los Angeles, there was an issue where there's a proposal that I think maybe more than 80%, probably 99% would agree with that child sex offenders should not be able to camp next to schools. Like homeless child. Like I don't know anybody who would disagree with that statement.
Yeah.
But there was apparently a vocal group in Los Angeles that stormed the city council chambers to protest against this idea, right? So my point is, they outnumbered the people who would support it, because why should you have to show up at the LA City Council to say child sex offenders shouldn't be able to camp outside schools? That is what they call self-evident, right? That is a self-evident truth that should not be allowed to occur, right? But sometimes for these common sense things, we need to actually deploy our people, because the ordinary people, the parents who are upset about this, they have jobs, they have family responsibilities. They can't just be like going to a city council meeting for 5 hours on a Tuesday night or whatever. So as a result, we're actually the voice of the majority in many cases.
Sure. So it's interesting. So for you guys, the litmus test, whether you'll take, I'll see, correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to see if I'm understanding right, is if you'll take on a client as long as it's like common sense. It's not whether it's left or right. It's just, it has to make sense to you or to the majority of people.
That's right. And so it doesn't mean I don't have to 100% agree with the cause. I just have to feel like, number one, there's like some sense to it. And number two, this is a cause that merits being heard. So I'm not the person who should be able to decide if your cause gets heard or not. I want to basically say, look, if it's an extremist, like crazy lunatic thing, I don't want to be a part of it. But if it's just something that I may have misgivings about, so for example, I started working with the cryptocurrency industry about 8-ish years ago. And at the time, they were being heavily discriminated against in our financial systems by the government, et cetera. And I started kind of working with them. But I was always a skeptic of crypto. Like I still own zero crypto myself, right? But I felt that at that time, no one was giving them the time of day. No one was listening to them. So even though I didn't 100% agree with crypto because I didn't fully understand it, I felt that they deserve to be heard.
Sure. Great. So now, I don't know how many people you employ or what their slants are. Like when you since you're working both sides of the aisle on some of these, and I'm only talking about more maybe political things. I know you guys do a bunch of work, but if you have people that are left leaning, like obviously they're not. I guess let me ask you like this: if you have employees that are going to these protests, do they go no matter what, or do they only go to things that they might agree with? Or you know what I mean?
The latter. They go to things that they agree with.
Okay,
so for example, I might have somebody who's more on the left, and maybe they'll go to an environmentalist demonstration, right? And I might have someone on the right, and maybe they'll go to a pro-police demonstration, right?
Yeah.
So people aren't necessarily linear. So
Sure.
there are people who might be environmentalists, but also anti-woke, right? So I like to give people the opportunity to participate and not make presumptions about their political orientation, because one thing that the establishment tries to do is they want to say, are you in camp 1 or camp 2?
Yep.
But in reality, most of us are a mix of ideology, right? So why should somebody who is pro-environment also be woke, right? Those things don't have to go together, right? The party establishments have decided they go together.
Yeah. There's way more nuance in the world than black and white, or the L or R or D or R. Yeah, for sure. So how many people do you employ, or do you do recruitment based on a specific project? Like, because I would employ. You imagine you might have to have a wide array or a wide net of people that you draw from. Yeah,
that's the benefit of being around for 14 years. Is we have a pretty wide bench, but we're always looking for people. We're constantly looking for people because, this is a naturally like business with a decent bit of turnover in people, sure. Right? And I always want different people of different ideologies in different states. Like, sometimes we do have to actively recruit. If you said this is rural Mississippi and I want 50 environmentalists in like a rural county in Mississippi, I don't know whether we would have that, but we are also good at identifying those people, and we have ways of doing that and turning them out. But in all of the major cities in the United States, we have huge groups.
Great. So I guess, a lot of people, I believe that a lot of protests or things of this nature are just organic in nature. From your perspective of being around as long as you have, and and also in a company that works in this area, how much of what we're seeing on TV as far as protests or things like this are 100% organic versus, I don't want to say staged, but helped along, you know what I mean, by some kind of benefactor or some kind of company or organization?
If you see it on the news, there's someone powerful behind it.
Okay.
If it's large enough to get on the news, how do you think you get on the news? You have a publicist. That's not free, right? How do you think you get the protest on the news in the first place? Is you have someone who pitched it to the news, right? And that you're probably paying that person to some degree, right? I mean, there is like, but I think that where I draw the distinction is almost every movement you've ever heard of has powerful backers, right? I mean, there's Musk, there's Soros, there's Reid Hoffman, there's Lorraine Jobs, right? I mean, there's just the Koch brothers, right? All these people on both sides, Ackman. I mean, like there's just an inordinate number. I mean, this is a capitalist country, right? So what happens is billionaires and wealthy interests create movements, and billionaires and wealthy interests attach themselves to movements that have been created, right? So let's not be naive. I think anyone who thinks there's such thing as a movement that has no affiliation with anyone powerful is just flat out dumb.
Okay. Yeah. So
but I guess the corollary to that is that it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think you have to understand a movement for what it is and what it advocates. So do you agree with what it's advocating for, or do you not? Rather than trying to parse, what is this or what is that? Like, is this group getting you a policy that you like?
Yeah.
The fact that there's some billionaire who may have some other reason for funding it, that's always going to happen. I mean, civil rights, gay rights, MAGA, Tea Party. I mean, they all have had ton of people and powerful interests behind them for various reasons, right? That doesn't mean those groups are bad. It just means they have powerful interests who have reason to support them and to make them successful.
Sure.
Conversely, just one more thing is that no matter how wealthy and powerful you are, a lot of times you can't make a crappy movement happen. I mean, look at Jeb Bush, look at Michael Bloomberg, right? These people put tons and tons of money in their presidential campaigns and ultimately failed, not because people didn't know who they were, but because their message wasn't compelling. So even if you have a ton of money, you can only use that so far.
Sure. What about people that say, some of this stuff is, a protest or an organization or, might have a good mission statement, and have a good cause, but that there's a little more manipulation going on, or there might be ulterior motives. Like for you, what's the difference between, or where's the line between like marketing and manipulation?
Well, by the way, marketing, it depends on your definition.
Yeah, sure. Marketing I get it. Yeah.
I mean, it's another sort of thing that I think a lot of people are naive about is like, open up your computer. You're getting ads. Why is there a girl in a bikini on an ad for hard seltzer? Why is it not a fat guy reading a comic book? Yeah, right? Yeah. Like, is that manipulation? Like, of course it is, right? Because if you drink a hard seltzer, does that mean the bikini girl is going to sleep with you? Not necessarily. No, right? So why are they doing that? So any form of marketing is trying to, by definition, is manipulation, because it's trying to get you to do something you otherwise weren't going to do. Right. So I think people are so naive but also juvenile in how they look at movements. And I think people have to approach it with, I don't want to say cynicism, but realism, right? Because the cynicism is basically saying they're all crooks. I don't trust anybody. And I don't think that's necessary. But I think but there's also like a misguided, delusional attitude that I see from a lot of people who say, the causes that I disagree with are all fake, manipulated, funded by billionaires. The causes I agree with, they're all real, they're grassroots, whatever. Well, that's just stupid, right? That's just stupid. Anyone who believes that is dumb.
Yeah. It's wild. And I think a lot of people know this stuff inherently, but they've never seen proof. One thing I wanted to ask, just because we were talking about, clientele and how you choose, have there been, what would, I guess, other than being like something you don't fully agree with, has there been clients that you've refused to work with or jobs you've turned down? And like, what would be, something for you to be like, yeah, we're not going to touch that, other than something that's like maybe only a small minority of people believe in, or a cause that you don't think is common sense?
Well, actually, here's a really good one is, so a couple of reasons. I mean, there are a lot of reasons we'd say no. I mean, one is simply the budget issue, right? Where their budget has to align with expectations, right? So if you're coming in and saying I have a $50,000 budget and I want to change national policy, I would say that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Just not going to happen.
However, if you said I have a $50,000 budget and I'm advocating on a local issue, I would say that's probably doable, right? Depending on what the issue is, right? So the budget has to match the expectations, right? We all know that, right? If I ask someone to paint my house and I say my budget is $200, I don't think they would do it, right? But I think the more interesting one is that I don't like to do anything that I think puts my people at risk, right? So that is to say, like, let's just say you have some sort of incident where you want me to protest something, but at the same event, there's going to be Antifa and there's going to be Proud Boys, right? Well, I don't necessarily want my people in the mix of that is likely to be, problematic. So if we did that, we would probably put in conditions of having security on site and all that, which would add substantial cost, which might preclude doing the engagement. You see what I'm saying? So, the the way I've stayed in business for 14 years is by having a pretty good sense of what is going to be like a mess of a campaign and what isn't.
Yeah. So it's interesting that someone can hire you and make this protest or this cause happen. It's, I the question I would have is just like, what's the process like taking something where someone's like, hey, I want to organize this protest and do this. And even though it's not its own organic groundswell, it's something that's, I guess for lack of a better word, a little bit manufactured. Like when does like manufactured kind of a situation become reality? Do you know what I mean? Like with that, like,
well, let me give you a great example. Okay, let's just say a couple residents are really upset because the traffic is moving too quickly on their road, right? And they want a big crosswalk and they want a street light and they want like some other traffic improvements. Well, okay, well, the city council, the mayor, the planners are gonna, they have a lot of people that are trying to get stuff from them. But now I'm like, okay, we're gonna picket them. We're gonna call them every day. We're gonna have hundreds of calls every day to them, right? Okay, well, yeah, were we making something that is like was otherwise not going to be anything? Yeah, but was it a good cause? Yes, right? Because so like did I just create an astroturf movement? Did I just undermine confidence in government by creating a crosswalk and a street light? Or did I actually do something good that other people were just too lazy to advocate for? So we were paid to do what other people were too lazy to advocate for.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that, I mean, that seems like a problem in modern day society, or, especially.
I don't think it's modern day society. I think it's society, period. I don't know whether society is more apathetic than it was. I mean, like that ebbs and flows, to be sure. I mean,
sure.
Okay. Yes. Society is probably more apathetic today than it was, in 1969 with Vietnam and civil rights and all of that. Right. But I mean, I think the internet has certainly given way to armchair activism, which doesn't always help, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people are like, okay, I posted a tweet or I posted Instagram about it, and as if that matters. But actually, in politics, in advocacy, relentless is actually what wins the day. And let me give you an indicative example of that. Is I don't know whether you've heard of these people called the Squad. These are like the far left guys in Congress, right? Like Ocasio-Cortez, and two of them. There's a lady named Cori Bush and a gentleman named Jamal Bowman, and they're both far left Democrats, and they were both primaried. So both Bush and Bowman had like millions of social media followers. They were both primaried by people who had like a couple thousand social media followers. Why? Because those other people knocked on doors, were out in the actual community, right? And those guys were living in the world of internet cable news activism, right? So on the ground makes a lot of so I think that the one thing about this sort of internet social media age is it gives people the impression that they've made a difference when they haven't.
Yeah. And I 100% agree. It's like, I think there's a mix of things. Like there is apathy, but there's also I don't know, especially the middle class seems to be working more. People are more distracted. There's so much news now versus like 3 channels, you know what I mean, that are kind of given the same type of situation. There's a million different things. People are listening to podcasts or just reacting to memes that they're seeing without following it up.
Well, they're very siloed, correct. So what you're getting at is actually another point that does affect this field, which is the siloing of information, right? So 3 channels is obviously not enough, right? 3 channels that essentially operate at the good graces of the United States government. I don't like that at all, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like what we had in the 60s with only 3 channels, right? That basically did mostly what the government wanted. I don't like that. But we have this thing where we're all getting silo and micro silo information. So that creates its own thing where I'll ask my conservative friends, oh, well, did you hear this controversy about Trump? They're like, I didn't know. And then if you ask my liberal friends, there's some controversy involving the Democrats. I didn't know, right? Because they don't know, because they're in the silos, right?
Yeah.
So, and people it's so easy to be in that silo, which we all recognize. I mean, I'm not making a novel or particularly interesting point there, but other than to say, one of the things I like about protest and in-person activism is we actually, when you see people, you're seeing human beings. So it doesn't matter what news you listen to, you're seeing people physically in front of you, right? So it's a way to almost force an issue, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. And just one other thing to your point with people thinking that the armchair activism is, I hear it all the time. Well, people, complaining on Facebook about something is not doing anything. Like I always tell people, you want to write a big paragraph on Facebook, but have you ever written or called a senator or a representative? No. Like, then, you're not doing anything. You're yelling into an echo chamber.
Well, the other thing is, if you don't vote them out of office, then you're essentially condoning them. So the other thing is, I always encourage people to everybody to be independent.
100%.
Don't let them take you for granted. If you say I'm a Republican or you say I'm a Democrat, then they already know they don't have to give a F about what you say, because they know you're going to vote. Ultimately, you complain, but you're going to show up and do what you're told, like a good boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're like their dog. You're like their lap dog. Yeah. And my opinion is, don't be a lapdog. Look at the two worst off groups. Okay, let's look at the two groups that vote like 80-90% for one party or the other. Black America votes 80 to 90% for the Democrats. Well, look at Black communities and how they're doing as a result of that support. The Democrats don't do anything for them. Black communities have lowest ownership, highest crime, etc. Right? Look at the most Republican areas in the country, 90% Republicans, rural America, right? Meth problems, record teenage pregnancy. They're dealing with the same problems that Black America is dealing with. Record crime, right? Why? Because they vote 90%. No one cares. The Republicans don't care about rural America. The Democrats don't care about Black America, because they know that those votes are already in the bag, right? Who do they care about? The suburban moms. Why? Because the suburban moms are swing voters, right? Everybody's like suburban moms because the suburban moms are smart and they vote. They look and they research who they want to vote for, and therefore both parties know that support is not for granted. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's why, the last campaign, people were going so hard at the independents because they knew it was going to come down to that. That's a big block that they have to get.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess while we're talking about politics, like, is there a point where I guess this becomes like, I don't want to say unethical, but is there a point where it should be reported, I guess, what's going on, like, I guess, should people be informed that this is something that is, there's backing, or it's like, I don't want to say a paid advertisement, but, kind of like that, like this is, an advocacy.
Well, I actually favor more disclosure requirements. And which is why I've actually been pushing Congress to adopt the Transparency in Political Demonstrations Act.
Yeah.
Which would require that any demonstration over 500 participants, so that's what I would consider a large demonstration, discloses their funding sources and all their vendors, right? So I want to see all of their sources, right, all the way up to the top, and then I want to see all their vendors all the way down to the bottom, right? And the reason for this, and I want to know all the funding, no matter how it's done, whether it's union groups, church groups, whatever, right? So I completely agree, but I think the reality is, what I think is going to be really funny if this actually ever gets passed, which I don't know if it will, is that you're just going to see that every protest has billionaire backers and every protest has a ton of vendors, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, whoop-de-doo.
So I guess from a standpoint of you and the business that you're in, I know there's, and I'm not trying to put the tinfoil hat on, right? But I just want to ask, but like a lot of protests, there's been alleged involvement from, government agencies or from FBI or CIA or whatever, you know what I mean? And that some of those could be some of the people that it could be more provocateurs. Like, is that something you've run into in your line of work, or something that, and like what can be done about that, or how could people spot that that's not something really organic, that that's something more manufactured?
Well, so when it comes, so let me talk about a little bit about our vetting process, which might partially answer that question.
Okay.
Well, one of the things we vet for is, so I already went over that we vet for people who are articulate and care about the cause,
Sure.
right? But the second part is that we vet for people who are committed to our principles of peaceful, respectful advocacy, right? So if you're coming in saying I'm looking to cause trouble, right, then we don't want you. Yeah. Right. So to the extent that anyone, whatever their reasons, is looking to cause trouble through one of our events, we don't want you. Right. And if you come and do that, which we gratefully in 14 years have not really had, if that were to happen, we would tell them to leave. And if they didn't leave, we would call the police.
Sure.
We have no involvement, and we have no interest in that.
Yeah.
Now, conceptually though, I obviously have a big problem. I'm a First Amendment guy. I'm a civil liberties guy. So I don't really want, I think that if law enforcement has informants to kind of make sure to just sort of keep an eye out to make sure that a group isn't going to do something violent, okay, right? But if they're spurring it along, then that's not okay. Sure. You know what I mean? So there's a big difference, right? And there's a word for it. It's called entrapment. If law enforcement is just sending someone there, listening, seeing what happens, and if there is a problem, addressing it, good. That's good police work. But if the law enforcement source is pushing the people to be aggressive where they otherwise were going to be peaceful, well, that's a big problem. And I oppose that practice. And I will note that this practice has transcended political administrations. Bush administration used it against Muslims. Biden administration used it against conservatives. And I really am curious how this administration is using it, but I am not comfortable with the practice.
Sure. And I didn't mean like that it was something that you guys were involved in or that you guys would be infiltrated by that. But I'm like, say you're at a protest, like I know it's something that was brought up, like there's a lot of speculation on that. And I know it's just speculation that in January 6th that there was, members, feds kind of moving things along and moving it a certain way. Has it something you've ever experienced with one of your events where people that aren't associated with you come in and try and move things a different way? And how do you guys have to react with that?
Oh, well, we don't stand for that, honestly. Yeah. We don't stand for that. I mean, I don't think we've really had this come up a lot.
Okay.
But the way that I always do it is when we're doing a big event on a sensitive topic, we establish a liaison with the police early on. Because the way I see it is different from how a lot of protest people see it. I see the police as our friends. The police are actually there to protect First Amendment expression. You know what I mean? So we'll establish liaison with police. So if we see any activity that's sometimes we'll be protesting somebody and the person will be screaming at us and we'll call the police. You know what I mean? Because the police are actually there to facilitate First Amendment expression. Yeah. So if anything untoward is going on, we'll bring in the police.
So this is just like a general, like bigger, I guess, philosophical question. Like, with your organization, you seem to have a code of, ethics or rules that you operate under. There might be other organizations doing similar work that may be more bad actors or not have the same level of ethics that you guys have. But if, in general, if perception like this can be manufactured or manipulated at scale, what does that mean for society or for democracy or for our country or the world,
Well, I guess that your question presumes that there's something new going on now that wasn't always going on.
True.
And so I don't necessarily agree with the premise of your question.
Okay.
I think that that there has always been in this country and presumably in other countries, but I'm very familiar with America's history.
Yeah.
Powerful people have always figured out a way to be heard, right? I mean, the people who created our country were powerful, rich people, right? Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Adams, right? These were extremely wealthy people. George Washington, they say, would have been equivalent of a billionaire today. So these were wealthy people at the time. I mean, if you look at the turn of the century, the previous century, that is, the railroad barons, right? They were able to do what they want. I don't think it's a good thing. I think that you have an ebb and flow, and we are moving to a period where I do think that we have a lot of concentration among certain extraordinarily wealthy individuals. This isn't about the 1%. This is about the richest 20 or 30 people in the country.
Yeah.
The Musk, the Bezos, Zuckerberg, and the like, right? Who seem to be having a lot of power on this country. But the way that I look at it is a little bit more positively, which is protest is actually one of those, you're never going to out lobby Jeff Bezos. You're never going to outspend Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or big pharma, big tech, right? You're never going to do it. But there is one thing that you can do that they can't do anything about, which is you can protest and you can hire people to protest, right? So it doesn't matter how we've protested billionaires' estates. We've protested some of the largest companies in this country, including Facebook, right? So you have the right to do that. You can have a $1 trillion company, multi-trillion-dollar company, and we can put protesters there and have our rights heard, right? And it's actually a beautiful thing. So a lot of people think that what we do helps the rich and the powerful stay powerful. No, it actually helps the less powerful in some cases hold those interests accountable.
Great. And I want to get into the next segment where you want to talk about how people can, advocate for themselves, but just one thing just a general kind of open-ended question here. What's one thing that we haven't talked about your industry that you would think would just shock the average person? What's
I'll tell you one thing that you guys would find interesting. So, when you see any kind of protest in Washington, D.C., in terms of a press conference, Ted Cruz, Ocasio-Cortez, the like, right? Think about that there are 15,000 staffers on Capitol Hill paid, right? And part of their unofficial job is to go to these events, right? So if you see a ton of people cheering for Ted Cruz or Ocasio-Cortez or whoever, those are people who literally work for them. So yeah, so just know let's not put me in a different category from any other protests, is I guess what I would say.
Yeah, sure. And when I'm talking about a lot of this, I'm talking about it on a whole, whether it's private sector, government sector, whatever. What should people be looking out for or paying attention to right now as far as things are going, and in this world?
I think the biggest thing people need to pay attention to is what a group is actually advocating for, and we'll get into this when I talk about how to advocate. But don't accept lip service. Politicians will always try to tell you what you want to hear, but not give you what you actually want, right? So they're experts at that. That's how they're elevated. Is they'll tell you they care, they'll tell you they're listening, they have a study, they have a committee, or whatever, but look at the policy, right? And a great example is in regards to big tech. You see these hearings where they're yelling and screaming at the big tech executives, but have they done anything to regulate big tech? No. So all the hearings is actually just like a farce. It's like a show.
Yeah.
So pay attention to what they do, not what they say.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's move into that. What can people do in this day and age, if they, if there's a situation that they need to, advocate for themselves, or or organize something going on for themselves.
That's great. Well, okay, so the number one thing is you got to figure out. So this saves my clients millions and millions of dollars when I work them through it on their causes, but it'll also save you a lot of hassle when you work it through yourself. So it's almost a worksheet. Because a lot of people don't do it, even very smart people. Number one is, what is your goal, right? Sometimes you fail even before you even started the race when you don't articulate a goal. So Occupy Wall Street didn't even articulate a goal. They didn't articulate policies that they wanted. So they failed before they even started because there's no objective. And without an objective, there cannot be a victory, right? So articulate what it is you want. So, okay, do I want a crosswalk built near my house? Or do I want a reprieve on the rent? Like, maybe I got laid off. I just got a new job. I need a few weeks to come current on my rent. Okay, well, that's your goal. That's what you're looking for. So try to achieve. Maybe you can have a goal that's ambitious, but then also have a goal that you feel like is feasible, right? Is doable. Yeah. Okay. Number two. So you have your goal. You got to figure out who has the power to achieve that goal for you, right? So, for example, if you are on a plane and you are upset about the delay, yelling at the flight attendant will not do much about your delay. The flight attendant is not empowered to make your plane go faster, right? Or to fix the maintenance or whatever, right? So you want to focus your ire, your attention on the person who can actually help you get what you want. So in the instance of that I raised about the rent, well, maybe the building superintendent is not in a position to provide you that rent extension. Maybe you need to talk to the owner, or maybe you need to talk to the regional manager of some sort, right? Okay. So figure out who can actually help you.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you don't figure out that, or let's just say I gave you the example of a $50,000 bill, right, for a hospital treatment. Well, the entry-level person at the hospital might not be able to give you a reprieve on that bill, but you need to go to the right person who actually has the power to resolve this problem for you. So figure out who that person is, or who that group is, right? Okay. So once you've done that, number three, figure out what matters to them, not why it matters to you. So many people spend so much time trying to talk about why it matters to me. Okay. They're trying to evict me. Oh, well, I have a cat, I have a dog, I have a kid, right? Well, why do they care? That's not their problem, right? Why should they care about those things? Yeah. Don't assume that they care about your situation. What is it that they care about? Well, maybe the building owner doesn't want to pay a lawyer $20,000 to try to evict you. Okay, well, that's a pretty big one, right? Maybe the building manager owner doesn't want to deal with a 3-month delay in the 6-month delay, depending on your state, with a court procedure for evicting you, right? That's going to be costly. And at the time, they're not going to get any money, right? So maybe it's to their benefit to give you an extension on the rent because the alternative is worse, right? So know your rights and know what is going to persuade them. And I always say when we're attacking someone, metaphorically, when we're coming after a, politician and we're criticizing them from the left, call a liberal racist, sexist, homophobic. For a conservative, call them pro-crime, anti-business, you know what I mean? Anti-Christian, you know what I mean? You see what I'm saying? You gotta focus on arguments that matter to them. You know what I mean? If you call a MAGA person racist, they'll be like, yeah, shut up, but if you call a Democrat racist, is like, anti-business, they'll be like, yeah, of course I'm anti-business. My goal is to, promote the social justice, right? So you have to make the argument that's going to resonate with them, right? So make that argument, be tactical, be strategic, right? figure out what are the things that are going to persuade them, whether it's a protest, whether it's calling, whether it's emailing, right? Calling the boss, calling the boss's boss, right? Then the biggest thing is understand when you've won and when you're just getting lip service. That goes back to what I said earlier, is did they give you what you're looking for, or did they make you feel heard?
Yeah.
And if the answer is they made you feel heard, well, that probably isn't enough. So you have to be relentless, and you have to keep following up and following up and following up.
Yeah. And then also when you say that, like, also knowing you've won, like, don't keep pushing after that.
Well, know when to leave it alone.
Yeah.
And know when to keep going. You know what I mean? And sometimes you have to say, look, this is not going to work. And sometimes you have to say, okay, we have to shake it up, try a different argument, try a different tactic, right?
Yeah.
But if you work through that sheet, you'll save a lot, that list of steps, you'll save a lot of time and money, because so many people waste so much of their time barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah, no. And again, it's a very common sense kind of a chain to follow that I think, people do get quagmired, different steps along the way.
They did.
What anything else that we haven't talked about that you think's important? I'm trying to be cognizant of your time. We're almost at the hour mark. And I know you probably got a lot going on. So anything else that we haven't talked about that you think's important, or anything we didn't touch on that we should get into before we leave?
Well, the biggest thing is I really encourage people to study up, know their rights, and know their responsibilities as a citizen, right? Because what I see is, on the one hand, I see a lot of people who don't know their rights, who think, oh, I need a permit just to protest. No, you don't, right? Who think, oh, the police can tell me to move across the street. Well, maybe they can, maybe they can't. For the most part, public areas are acceptable places to protest. So know your rights, but also know what you don't have the right to do. So, for example, you don't have the right to impede law enforcement. You don't have the right to block a street without a permit, right? So study up, know what you can, know what you can't do, and be informed. Be informed, be respectful, be collaborative. Always be looking to come to the deal, make a deal, but always be willing to be relentless in advocating for your positions. So whether you're trying to change national policy, or whether you're just trying to deal with a matter of great personal importance, I hope that these tips will help your audience.
Absolutely, man. Adam, I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm going to shut this off, but I'm not hanging up. So just hold on 1 second.
You got it. Yeah, this has been my pleasure.
Main question. I almost did a podcast file. Where can people find more information about you and more information about Crowds on Demand? Or if there's also, I like that you're passionate about training people or teaching people on how to become better advocates for themselves. If there's any resources that you recommend for that, where people could get a jump start on that.
The biggest resource, there's a book that's gonna come out within in the near future that'll be giving people those resources.
A book you're writing?
Yes, it is.
Oh, great,
yes,
great.
You asked about where you can find us. www.crowdsondemand.com, crowdsondemand.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at CEO Adam Swart. Well, I guess they call it X, but CEO Adam Swart. I'm too old for that.
I hear. All right, I'm not hanging up. Hold on 1 second. I'm just gonna shut the recordings off. Another one in the books, and this one was a heavy hitter, so you might want to go back and re-listen and take notes, because there was a lot of knowledge, a lot of jewels, a lot of good, important information dropped in this one. So give it a re-listen. It's worthwhile. Now, June 18th, Chopperhead and the Left Lane Collective collaborate once again to bring you the Custom Social Motorcycle Show happening at Laconia Bike Week, one of the oldest, biggest motorcycle rallies in the country. We've got a curated space within the rally that you are going to want to we got a space. You don't even have to go to the rest of Laconia. Well, go the day before to the hill climbs and the show over there. Then come to our show on Thursday, June 18th. at the drive-in theater. It's the biggest property there. You can't miss it. We got a motorcycle show from 12 to 6. Now, this motorcycle show, I got a curated section of bikes that we're highlighting and featuring, that builders from all over the country, but the rest of it's ride in. So ride your custom over, ride your chopper, ride whatever custom you got. We got a place for you there. 12 to 6, and then that night from 7 on is the Chopperhead 25th anniversary party, and you know how we do. It's going to get ridiculous. We got bands. Let me just give you a little jewel right here. Murphy's Law's playing, and my brother Slane's playing. And if you want to hear about the rest, you got to keep listening, because we're going to drop more as it goes. We're going to do a live podcast. We're going to do all kinds of stuff. So make sure you come on out. Now, if you're serious about your health, check out my man Christian Yordanov, who is a absolute ruler at this. He's a functional health practitioner and an author. Go to livelongerformula.com/bigtruth, and he will help you out seriously, big time. If you need some artwork, go to tattooflashcollective.com. If you want to represent for me in my shop, Chopperhead Custom Cycles, just go to chopperhead.com or come by, because we're a full brick and mortar motorcycle shop. You can come on in. We're open Tuesday to Saturday, 13 County Road, East Freetown, Massachusetts. Go to bigtruth.com to get more information on the podcast. And if you want to really rep and you want to get the inside info and be more involved and get early access and deeper analysis, no filters, go to the back channel, patreon.com/bigtruth. Check it all out. I appreciate you guys staying to the end. You absolutely rule. Until next time, keep it locked.